Sion did not breathe because he needed air. He breathed because the sound reminded the galaxy that he still owned a mouth. Each inhale scraped through a throat that had been cut more than once. Each exhale left his lips in a rasp that might have been prayer, might have been laughter. Pain lived in him the way blood lived in men who had not yet learned they were dead. It filled the hollows, stitched the fractures, knotted him together with a cruelty so intimate it felt like love. Malachor V turned slowly beneath a sky the color of old bruises. The planet's wounds never closed. Gravity here had been taught to hate. The stone remembered the scream of the mass shadow generator and kept singing it, low and endless, under every footfall. The Trayus Academy, ruined, half-buried, still proud, rose like a black keep from a field of shattered bones and twisted metal. Sion's assassins waited in a ring, their hands folded in their sleeves, their faces blank behind pale masks. They were children raised by absence. They had been taught that mercy was a weakness and silence a weapon. Their loyalty was not affection. It was fear with discipline. Sion lifted his head. The seams in his face pulled, opening into fresh cracks, and a bead of dark blood traced his cheek before it boiled away in a faint hiss. He felt it again. Not a presence. A hunger. Somewhere beyond the bruised horizon of the Force, something immense was moving. An empty throat traveling through the stars, searching for song. When it drew near, life fell quiet. When it fed, worlds went blind. The assassins could not feel it. They were sharpened knives, not seers. But they watched their master's posture change, the way hounds watched a wolf turn toward the wind. "It comes," Sion said. One of the masked figures shifted. The one with a scar along the edge of his mask, a hairline fracture repaired with dark lacquer, knelt and bowed his head lower. "Command us," the assassin murmured. Sion rose. His joints should have cracked apart. Instead, they obeyed, reluctantly, like doors forced open on frozen hinges. He stepped from the broken sanctum into a corridor whose walls were carved with Sith runes and soot. The air tasted of old fire and older despair. Traya had once walked these halls with him. Traya had spoken of the Force as if it were a chain and a choice. Traya had taught them to hate their own dependence and then punish them for it, the way cruel mothers punish sons for needing warmth. Sion's mouth twisted. He had helped cast her down. He had watched her fall, stripped of power, and he had felt a satisfaction so sharp it had almost relieved him. Almost. But the hunger in the dark. This was different. This was not philosophy. This was not a lesson. This was an animal made from a wound. And Sion would not kneel to an animal. He stopped at the mouth of a hangar gouged into the Academy's belly. A Sith cruiser waited there, its hull scarred and patched, its shape hunched like a beast braced for violence. Workers, silent thralls with hollow eyes, moved around it like ants around a carcass. The assassins flowed behind him. He looked back once, not at them but through them, as if seeing the galaxy beyond their shoulders. "I will not be ruled by hunger," he said. No one answered. They did not need to. The vow was the sound of his steps as he walked toward the ship. The ship's bridge felt like a chapel built for a dead god. The ceiling arched overhead in ribbed beams. The consoles were ancient, their interfaces stripped down and brutal, designed not for comfort but obedience. Light bled from narrow slits, red and sickly, painting every faceplate and blade edge, as if the ship itself were wounded. Sion stood at the center of it, hands clasped behind his back. A holomap shimmered before him, stars like scattered salt, roots like veins. Each line looked too delicate to contain the cruelty he intended. The captain knelt and extended a thin tablet. The man's name had been something once, but Sion had burned it away with disuse. He did not need names. Names made men feel real. "The Devourer moves toward the Miraluka world," the captain said. "Katarr." The word struck the bridge like a thrown stone. Several assassins shifted. Not in fear. Fear was a language they spoke fluently. but in recognition. Rumors clung to Katarr like damp cloth, a place of sight without eyes, a place where the Force was not an abstraction but a daily breath, a place where Jedi sometimes gathered in secret, a feast hall for a starving beast. Sion's fingers flexed once, cracking the skin at his knuckles. The wound sealed itself. Pain, immediate and intimate, surged and steadied him. "Root," he said. The captain touched the tablet. The holomap removed itself, drawing a line that bent like a blade toward Katarr's coordinates. "The Devourer's ship is old," the captain said. "A wreck held together by will. It moves as if it does not fear pursuit." "It does not fear," Sion replied. "It does not understand fear. It understands need." He stepped closer to the holomap. Red light soaked into his fractures, turning him into a broken statue lit from within. He imagined the other one, hidden under robes and a mask, a void pretending to wear the shape of a man. Hunger had made that creature powerful, yes. Hunger had made it terrible. But hunger also made it predictable. Sion lifted his hand and dragged 2 fingers through the projected path as if cutting flesh. "We intercept," he said. "Before Katarr." The captain hesitated. Not long. Just long enough to prove he still possessed a mind that could calculate risk. "And if it feeds first?" the captain asked. Sion turned slowly. The sound of his joints was wrong, wet stone grinding. The assassins lowered their heads, not from reverence but instinct. A storm was moving through the room. "If it feeds," Sion said, "then it will try to feed again, and again, until there is nothing left but silence." He leaned forward, close enough that the captain could see the thin red light crawling under Sion's skin. "Silence is not conquest," Sion whispered. "It is surrender." The captain swallowed. Sion heard it. A small human sound, like a mouse in a tomb. "We go now," Sion said. The ship's engines began to thrum. Somewhere deep below, old metal woke and complained. The bridge shuddered with the first pulse of power. Sion watched the stars on the holomap fade as the ship entered hyperspace. The red points stretched into bleeding lines, then vanished. In the dark between moments, the hunger waited. The Ravager drifted like a corpse that refused burial. Its hull was cracked and scarred, the bones of an old warship stitched together with salvage and stubbornness. Plates of armor overlapped like scales, each one carrying the memory of a battle. Its engines did not burn with clean fire. They smoldered, coughing sparks into the void as if the ship itself were sick. Inside, the air tasted of cold iron and hunger. Nihilus sat in stillness that was not calm. It was absence dressed in robes. The pale mask on his face did not reveal expression, yet the chamber felt full of mouth. The darkness around him pressed against the walls as if trying to swallow them. His crew were not truly alive. They moved with the obedience of drowned men. Their skin clung too tightly to bone, their eyes too empty to reflect light. They knelt on metal that sweated frost. Katarr waited ahead. A living song in the Force, bright enough to draw predators. Nihilus did not speak. His will did not require language. The chamber answered him anyway. Chains creaked, hull plates groaned. A distant conduit screamed as if something inside the ship had been pinched. A captain, if such a word still meant anything, crawled forward and placed his forehead to the floor. "Soon," he whispered, voice breaking like thin glass. "Soon we feed." The word feed did not belong to the living here. It belonged to animals and the starving. It belonged to desperate men in winter. The air grew colder. Nihilus turned his head slightly, as if scenting something that did not exist in the vacuum of space. The presence he felt was not a meal. It was a thorn, a shard of pain moving toward him with purpose. Hunger recognized hunger. But this was not hunger. This was rage. Something struck the Ravager's shields. The ship shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. The husks flinched. Their fear was slow, like blood that had forgotten how to flow. Another impact. The old hull groaned louder. Nihilus rose. His robes fell around him like night spilling from a cliff. The mask faced the chamber's sealed doors. No eyes were visible, yet it felt as if something behind the mask was staring through the layers of steel. A tremor moved through the force, rippling outward. The husks around him shivered as if touched by cold water. Outside, in the void, another ship burned hard toward the Ravager, an arrow made of spite. The Devourer did not flee. It drifted forward, unhurried, and the pain that approached did not slow. The first volley was not meant to destroy. It was meant to announce. Sion's cruiser spat red fire into the void. The bolts struck the Ravager's shields and burst into sheets of crackling light that died as quickly as they were born. The old ship's defenses were weak, but not absent. They held, trembling like a tired man raising his hands to block a blow. The Ravager returned fire with lazy malice. Its turbolasers, half dead, roared and sent burning lines across space. One grazed Sion's starboard flank, peeling away armor with a howl of tortured metal. Sion did not blink. He stood inside a boarding pod with his assassins crouched around him. They were silent, their breath loud in the cramped chamber. The pod shuddered as it launched. For a heartbeat, weight vanished. The pod's small viewport showed nothing but darkness and distant stars. Then the Ravager loomed. Enormous, broken, inevitable. It looked less like a ship and more like a ruined fortress drifting through an ocean without water. The pod hit. Metal screamed. Magnets bit. Cutting torches flared, carving a circle into the Ravager's hull. The air inside the pod grew sharp with the smell of burning steel. One assassin made a sign with his fingers, a gesture half prayer, half ritual. Sion watched and felt something like disdain, something like amusement. Rituals were crutches. Pain was enough. The circle of hull fell inward. Beyond it, waited darkness and cold. Sion stepped through first. The corridor beyond was narrow, lined with pipes and cables that hung like veins. Frost coated the walls. The lights were dim, flickering in a slow, sick rhythm. His assassins followed, blades drawn. They moved like wolves in a crypt, their footsteps barely whispering against the metal. Sion walked louder. He did not care to hide. He wanted the Ravager to know he was inside it. The ship seemed to respond. Somewhere deep, a sound rose, low and hungry. The air thickened, not with heat, but with pressure. The force here was wrong. It did not flow. It pooled like stagnant water. Sion's fractures ached. The pain was sharper now, not from his own body but from the thing ahead, reaching out with invisible teeth. A husk stumbled into view. Its mouth hung open. It held a blaster rifle with hands that shook. The assassin behind Sion flicked his wrist. A blade flashed. The husk's head rolled, striking the corridor wall with a dull thud. No blood flowed. Only ash-like dust drifted from the severed neck. More husks emerged. 12. 2 dozen. Their movements were slow, but the air around them carried that same starving pressure. The assassins struck with precision, carving through limbs and throats. Blaster bolts sparked off armor. The corridor filled with smoke and the metallic scent of scorched flesh. Sion walked through the melee as if through rain. The hunger pressed harder. He felt it now, close, in the bones of the ship. Not a man, a wound. Sion's mouth curled. "Come," he whispered, and the words sounded like a curse. The Ravager's corridors were a maze of old war and newer decay. Every turn smelled of rust. Every hatch groaned like a wounded animal when forced open. The ship's heart beat somewhere far ahead, slow and hungry. Sion walked until the fighting thinned behind him, until the assassin's quiet efficiency faded into echoes. He did not need them now. This was not a hunt for prey. This was a challenge. The corridor widened into a chamber that might once have been a gathering place. An officer's mess, perhaps, long ago when the ship had known flags and orders and men who ate meals without fearing the taste of emptiness. Now the tables were overturned, the floor coated in frost, and chains hung from the ceiling like vines in a dead forest. The air grew colder with each step. Sion felt the hunger lick at him. It touched the cracks in his skin and tried to pull them wider. It reached into him the way a thief reached into a pocket. Pain answered. Sion's own agony surged, flaring like a torch in a tomb, and the hunger recoiled, just slightly, as if surprised to find that what it grasped was not life but something harder, something jagged. A shadow gathered at the far end of the chamber. Not a shadow cast by light, a shadow that swallowed light. Nihilus emerged. The pale mask faced Sion. The robes hung in folds that did not quite obey gravity. Around him the air seemed to thin, as if the chamber itself was holding its breath. Sion felt the pull intensify. The hunger did not speak, but its intention was clear. Consume. Reduce. Silence. Sion's hand dropped to the hilt of his lightsaber. He did not ignite it yet. He wanted a moment. He wanted to taste the enemy across from him. "You were made from weakness," Sion said. The hunger answered by stepping forward. The chamber's frost thickened. Chains creaked as if tugged by unseen hands. Somewhere behind the walls, a conduit burst with a pop, and sparks rained down like dying fireflies. Sion ignited his blade. Red light flooded the chamber, turning the frost to blood-colored glass. His saber's hum was steady, confident. Nihilus' saber ignited in response, its blade a hungry crimson that seemed to drink the air around it. They moved. Not like duelists performing for a crowd. Like animals meeting over the same carcass. Their blades clashed, red on red, sparks exploding outward. Sion drove forward with brute force, each strike meant to break bone. Nihilus' movements were fluid, unnaturally smooth, as if guided not by muscle but by tide. Sion's strikes landed, and Nihilus slid aside, the robes swaying like water. When Nihilus countered, the blade moved with an eerie inevitability, and Sion felt it. Not the cut, but the pull behind the cut, the attempt to drink from him. His skin split. His shoulder tore open. Pain flared like lightning. He laughed. Nihilus' mask tilted, as if listening. Sion stepped into the next exchange and took a blow deliberately across his ribs, letting the blade bite, letting the wound open. The hunger surged forward, eager, and Sion fed it pain instead of life. His fractures tightened. Dark energy pulsed beneath his skin. He swung hard, and his blade caught Nihilus' saber at an angle that forced it down. He followed with a kick, driving Nihilus back. The hunger did not stumble like a man. It drifted, recoiling like smoke pushed by wind. Sion advanced. "You are not a lord," Sion snarled. "You are a mouth." The chamber shuddered. The hunger answered not with words, but with force. Sion felt invisible hands clamp around him. Not choking, pulling. The same pull that lived in Nihilus' presence, amplified. It reached into Sion's wounds and tried to unwind him, to peel his pain away like bandages, to leave only the corpse underneath. Sion's knees bent. For a heartbeat, the world threatened to go soft at the edges, as if his body was finally remembering it had died. Then pain surged again, volcanic. He drew it up, not as a defense, but as a weapon. He let the agony swell until it eclipsed thought. His eyes burned. He ripped free of the grip and lunged. Their sabers clashed again, louder, sparks showering the frost. The air screamed, and somewhere deep in the Ravager, the ship's hungry heart began to beat faster. Sion had fought Jedi. He had fought soldiers. He had fought beasts on worlds with poison air and worlds with burning oceans. He had fought men who begged and men who laughed and men who promised vengeance. He had never fought hunger given hands. Nihilus' blade moved like an inevitability, slipping past parries that should have held, turning angles that had no business turning. Each time the saber came close, Sion felt the pull again, not merely at his flesh but at something deeper, at the dark glue holding his corpse together. Sion answered with fury. He struck harder. He abandoned finesse. He threw his body into every swing, trusting that if Nihilus cut him, pain would knit him back. And if Nihilus tried to drink from him, pain would poison the mouth. They clashed near a wall where an ancient banner, once the emblem of a Sith fleet, hung in tatters, frozen stiff. Nihilus' saber carved through it, sending black shreds drifting. Sion drove forward, red blade hammering. Nihilus yielded a step, then two. It was not fear. It was calculation. The hunger learned. The chamber's temperature dropped again. Frost crawled up Sion's boots. His breath came out in smoke. Nihilus raised a hand. The force twisted. The chains overhead jerked and snapped taut, yanking free from their moorings. They whipped through the air like iron serpents, striking the floor with ringing cracks. One wrapped around Sion's leg, another around his arm. Sion snarled and pulled. The chain bit into rotting flesh, splitting it. Pain flared. Nihilus stepped close, mask inches away. The hunger surged. Sion felt it inside him, an inward tug, like his very being was being turned into smoke. For the first time in a long time, fear flickered at the edge of his mind. Not fear of death. Fear of being unmade. Sion's cracked lips pulled back from teeth. No, he hissed. He did not resist by holding on to life. He did not have life. He resisted by holding on to spite. He summoned every memory that hurt. The battlefields of the Mandalorian Wars. The screams of civilians crushed under collapsing cities. The look on a Jedi's face when they realized they could not save everyone. The sound of Trayus' voice, cold as iron, telling him his pain was a leash. He poured it all into himself. The dark side responded like a faithful hound. It surged up, filling his fractures with molten rage. His wounds closed with wet snaps. The chain around his arm snapped, links exploding outward. The one around his leg tore free, taking flesh with it. The flesh grew back. Sion stepped forward into the hunger, refusing to let it pull him away. He drove his saber toward Nihilus' mask. Nihilus' blade rose to block, but Sion twisted his wrist at the last instant and let his saber slide down Nihilus' blade, sparks screaming. He slammed his shoulder into Nihilus' chest. For a heartbeat, the robes felt solid. For a heartbeat, the hunger was forced into the shape of a man. Sion took advantage. His left hand, fingers cracked, nails black, shot up and grabbed Nihilus by the mask. It was cold. Not the cold of metal. The cold of a grave that had never known sun. Sion squeezed. The mask did not crack. It did not dent. It was not truly an object. It was an idea made visible. Nihilus' saber swung for Sion's neck. Sion let it. The blade cut deep. His head nearly separated from his body. Pain flared so bright it turned the world white for an instant. Then his neck knit itself back together, muscle and tendon snapping into place with a sickening wetness. Nihilus hesitated. The hunger did not understand this. Sion laughed again, a sound like stones grinding. "You cannot kill what is already dead," he rasped. He yanked Nihilus closer and drove his saber straight through the robes, straight toward where a heart would have been. The red blade entered darkness. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the chamber screamed. The force convulsed. The chains overhead rattled wildly. Frost exploded off the floor in a burst of white dust. The red light of both sabers flickered. Nihilus' body arched, not in pain, because hunger did not feel pain, but in disruption. The hunger's shape faltered. Sion pushed harder, forcing his blade deeper. He leaned in until his face was inches from the pale mask. "You are done," he whispered. And he poured everything, pain, rage, stubbornness, into the strike. The mask cracked. Not physically, conceptually, like a lie exposed. A soundless howl filled the chamber, a vacuum tearing at reality. Nihilus collapsed inward, robes imploding, the hunger folding into itself like a dying star. Sion held on. The pull tried to take him too, tried to drag him into the collapsing void. Sion anchored himself with agony. He screamed, not from fear, not from pain, but from defiance. And his scream was the nail that pinned him to existence. The hunger died. The chamber fell silent. Nihilus' saber clattered to the floor and extinguished. Sion stood alone, his blade still burning, his hand still raised where the mask had been. In his palm was nothing, and yet the air felt lighter, as if a great mouth had been sewn shut. The silence after hunger was not peace. It was shock. Sion's saber hummed, the only living sound in the chamber. He looked down at the heap of robes, at the ash that drifted upward as if trying to return to the void. He felt something else too, a faint echo, like a toothache in the force where the Devourer had been. A wound remained. Not the wound that had made Nihilus, but the scar his death left. Sion flexed his fingers. The air around his hand felt colder than the rest of the chamber. He did not like it. The hatchway behind him hissed, and assassins poured in, moving carefully as if entering a sacred space. Their masks turned toward the ash on the floor, then toward Sion. The captain knelt first. Others followed, a ripple of obedience. Sion did not tell them to rise. He stepped away from the ash and walked toward the chamber's far wall, where a viewport, cracked but intact, looked out into space. Stars glittered, cold, indifferent. "Is it dead?" the captain asked. His voice trembled, and he hated himself for it. Sion could smell the shame on him like sweat. "It is undone," Sion said. "Dead is for men." He deactivated his saber. The red light vanished, leaving only the dim flicker of the Ravager's failing panels. The chamber became a cave again. Sion turned to the kneeling assassins. "You have served under a void," he said. "It would have eaten you when you were no longer useful. It would have eaten you even if you were." The assassins did not move. Their loyalty was a blade pointed wherever he directed. Sion stepped forward until he stood before the captain. He crouched, bringing his ruined face close to the man's mask. "Listen," Sion whispered. "You will not speak that name again. You will not whisper of hunger as if it were a god. The galaxy does not bend to empty mouths." The captain swallowed, then bowed lower. Sion straightened. "We go to Katarr," he said. A murmur rippled through the assassins. It was not dissent. It was hunger of a different kind, anticipation. The captain lifted his head. "To destroy the Miraluka." Sion's gaze sharpened. "No," he said. "To slaughter Jedi." He tasted the word slaughter like a fine wine. Katarr, he knew, was not merely a world of blind seers. It was a rumor among the Jedi, a place of hidden councils, a place where they gathered when they were afraid. The Devourer had been drawn there for the same reason predators were drawn to herds. Sion would not let the Jedi escape simply because the Devourer had been removed. He would take what the hunger had wanted and make it deliberate. He looked down at the ash on the floor again, at the last remnants of Nihilus' shape. Hunger had been swift. Hunger would have consumed the world itself, leaving nothing but silence. Sion wanted something else. He wanted screams that lasted. The Ravager's engines rumbled, as if the ship had sensed the shift in command and was pleased by it. The crew, husks and thralls, moved with renewed purpose. The ship turned toward Katarr, toward the force-bright beacon that waited, unaware that the predator approaching was not a mouth, but a blade. As the Ravager entered hyperspace, Sion closed his eyes. For an instant, he imagined Trayus smiling. Then he crushed the image beneath pain and opened his eyes again. Katarr greeted them with stillness. The world did not glow with city lights. It glimmered with soft patterns, temples and settlements arranged with the quiet order of people who live by sight that did not require eyes. From orbit, the planet looked like a pale jewel under thin cloud. As the Ravager descended, Sion felt the force here, thick and bright, a woven tapestry of living minds. It was almost beautiful. Almost. He landed far from the main temple complex, on a plateau of pale stone that reflected starlight. The Ravager's landing struts dug into the rock with a groan. Assassins poured out, cloaks snapping in a cold wind that smelled faintly of salt, and something stranger, like flowers crushed in a fist. Their boots made soft sounds on stone. They moved, with practiced silence. Sion led them. The temple complex rose ahead, a cluster of pale spires and archways, its architecture gentle, flowing, unlike the brutal angles of Sith design. Braziers burned along the steps, their flames steady, protected from wind by curved stone. The light was warm, almost welcoming. It made Sion want to break something. They reached the steps. At the top stood Jedi, more than Sion had expected. They were in simple robes, their faces tired, their posture guarded. Some were old, some were young. A few wore the scars of war. Their sabers ignited in a line, blue, green, a rare yellow, casting light that danced across the pale stone. Behind them, Malachor civilians clustered in shadowed archways, their faces covered with cloth or masks, their heads tilted as if listening to a sound only they could hear. They were blind in the mundane sense, yet their gazes seemed to fall directly on Sion's cracked form. He could feel their terror. It tasted different than the fear of soldiers. It was deeper, woven with prayer. A Jedi stepped forward, a woman with hair bound tightly at the nape of her neck. Her saber was green, steady. "Leave," she said. Her voice carried without strain, practiced. "This world is not yours." Sion's mouth twitched. He glanced up at the temple's spires. "This world is not yours either," he replied. "You hide here like children under a bed." The Jedi's jaw tightened. "We have harmed you." Sion laughed softly. "You have harmed the galaxy," he said. "With your mercy. With your hesitation." "Nani?" He lifted his hand. His saber ignited, red light spilling down the steps like fresh blood. The assassins behind him ignited their own blades, some red, some unstable crimson, some mere vibroblades humming with lethal charge. The Jedi line tensed. Sion walked forward. The first clash was an explosion of color and sound. Sabers met with hissing fury. Sparks flew. The night filled with the smell of ozone and scorched fabric. Sion moved through the fight like a battering ram. He struck down the first Jedi he met, shattering a guard with brute force. The Jedi tried to pivot, to redirect, but Sion's strength did not care about finesse. His saber carved through shoulder and chest. The Jedi collapsed, eyes wide, as if surprised that hiding had failed. A second Jedi lunged for Sion's side. Sion let the blade cut him, felt the pain, used it as fuel, and backhanded the Jedi with such force that the man's skull struck the stone steps with a wet crack. Assassins swarmed the flanks, engaging Jedi in pairs, in threes. They fought not like Sith of old who reveled in theatrics, but like hunters trained to kill quickly. They used the dark side like poison in a blade, subtle, efficient. The Malachor civilians cried out. Some fled into the temple. Some fell to their knees, hands clasped, whispering prayers. A young Malachor woman stood frozen in an archway, her head lifted, her face pale beneath her veil. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles whitened. Sion felt her, not through eyes, through the Force. She was bright, not like a Jedi, not trained, but sensitive, an ember waiting for air. Her fear was sharp, yet beneath it was something else. A stubbornness, a refusal to be swallowed by despair. Sion's gaze snapped to her. She recoiled as if struck. An assassin moved toward her, blade raised, eager. Sion raised a hand. The assassin froze, obedient. The Malachor woman trembled. Tears slipped from beneath her veil and traced her cheeks. Sion turned away from her, back to the Jedi. He slaughtered until the steps were slick with blood and melted frost. The temple's braziers still burned, indifferent. The night air filled with smoke. When the last Jedi fell, cut down, crushed, impaled. Silence returned in fragments, broken only by sobs and the crackle of flames. Sion stood at the top of the steps, looking down at the bodies, at the pale stone stained dark. He did not feel satisfaction. He felt purpose. He glanced again toward the archway where the Miraluka woman stood. She had not moved. Sion stepped toward her. The antechamber smelled of incense and blood. Sion stepped over the threshold and felt the faint hum of the temple's defenses. Symbols carved into stone, prayers etched into architecture. They were gentle protections, meant to ward off petty malice, not the concentrated spite of a Sith Lord held together by pain. The Miraluka woman knelt before him, her hands pressed to the floor. Her veil had slipped, revealing a face young enough to still carry softness, though terror had carved hard lines into it. Tears traced her cheeks. She did not look up with eyes. There were none. Her gaze, in the way of her people, was inward and outward at once, seeing through the Force. Sion could feel what she saw. She saw him as a storm of cracks and fire. She saw the dead Jedi on the steps. She saw perhaps the echo of the hunger that had almost come, the mouth that would have eaten her world. And she saw that the mouth had been replaced by something that did not want to swallow. It wanted to squeeze. "You are afraid," Sion said. Her lips parted. Her voice came out as a whisper. "I am alive." The answer surprised him. It was not pleading. It was a statement, as if she were reminding herself. Sion crouched. His joints protested. Pain flared. He let it. He brought his face close to hers. "What is your name?" he asked. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Visas." Sion's mouth quirked. Simple. A name like a prayer. "You see," he said, without eyes. "Yes, you will see for me," Sion said. Her breath caught. "Eh." Sion's hand closed around her jaw, not gentle. His fingers were cold, cracked, and impossibly strong. He tilted her face up. "You will," he repeated, "because your world still stands. Because your people still breathe. Because I chose it." Now. Visas trembled beneath his grip. She did not pull away, not because she did not want to, but because she understood pulling away would be meaningless. "You killed them," she whispered, and the word "them" carried grief that filled the chamber. "The Jedi." "Yes," Sion said. "They would have died anyway. The hunger would have taken them. I simply chose the manner." He released her. She fell forward slightly, catching herself on her hands. Her shoulders shook. Sion stood, looming. Assassins watched, silent. "You will come with us," Sion said. "You will live. You will learn what your sight is worth." Visas lifted her head. Tears still clung to her cheeks, but her voice steadied. "I will not serve you." Sion laughed softly. "You already do," he said. "You stand because I allow it." He turned, walking toward the chamber's exit. He did not look back as the assassins moved, lifting Visas with careful, unfeeling hands. Outside, the temple complex lay quiet. Bodies were being dragged away, piled, burned. The Miraluka civilians watched from a distance, their silent grief a weight in the air. Sion looked up at the night sky. Katarr's stars were cold. He felt the galaxy beyond, the Republic limping, the Jedi scattering like wounded birds. He felt the absence where hunger had been. And he felt something else, faint but distinct. A thread pulling at him from far away, a familiar wound in the Force. It was like recognizing a scar with your tongue. The Exile. Sion's fingers tightened. The Ravager lifted off, leaving Katarr's pale stone stained and smoking but still intact. In the wake of the ship's departure, Miraluka voices rose, not in celebration, not in triumph, but in mourning. Sion did not care. He had taken what he wanted, and now he would take more. Malachor welcomed the Ravager like a grave welcoming a corpse back home. The ship settled into the planet's broken dockworks with a groan, metal protesting against ancient stone. Sion walked down the ramp and felt the planet's sick gravity tug at his fractures. Malachor always tried to pull him apart. It remembered what he was and resented that he remained. He liked that. In the Trayus Academy, the throne hall waited. Vast, pillared, carved with runes that spoke of conquest and betrayal. The air was cold enough to bite. Torches burned in iron sconces, their flames strangely steady, as if even fire here had learned discipline. Sion took the throne. It was not a throne built for comfort. It was a jagged seat of dark stone and salvaged durasteel, assembled by hands that had never known gentleness. Sitting on it felt like leaning into a blade. He welcomed the pain. Assassins knelt in ranks before him. Their masks reflected the torchlight in pale slivers. Behind them, thralls stood like furniture. Visas was brought forward, shackled, flanked by guards. Her veil covered her face again. She stood rigid, her hands bound, her posture proud in a way that looked like defiance and felt like grief. Sion rested his elbows on the throne's armrests and looked down at his gathered servants. "The Devourer is gone," he said. A ripple moved through the hall. Not relief. Awe. Fear. "Some of you believed it was our Lord," Sion continued. "Some of you believed it was our doom. It was neither." He leaned forward, his cracks catching torchlight like fault lines. "It was a weakness," he said. "A beast that would have eaten the galaxy and called it victory." His gaze swept the kneeling assassins. "We do not win by silence," Sion said. "We win by domination, by pain, by breaking our enemies until they begged to be ruled." The assassins lowered their heads further. They understood that language. Sion raised a hand, pointing toward Visas without looking at her. "This one sees," he said. "She will be our knife in the dark, our sight where our enemies think themselves hidden." Visas' shoulders tensed. Sion's mouth curled. "And if she refuses," he said, "then she will be taught." He looked at the captain, his chief among assassins. "Gather what remains," Sion ordered. "Every warband, every hidden cult, every Sith who crawls in the gutter and calls themselves strong. Bring them here. They will kneel, or they will be broken." The captain bowed. "And the Jedi?" the captain asked. Sion's eyes narrowed. "The Jedi have lived too long on fear," he said. "They will learn that hiding only delays the knife." He rose from the throne. The sound of him standing echoed through the hall like a verdict. "Send hunters," he said. "Not mindless killers, hunters. Learn their names. Learn their friends. Learn what they love. Then take it." The hall stayed silent, but beneath the silence was hunger of another kind. Ambition. The assassins wanted purpose. They wanted direction. They wanted to be more than ghosts. Sion gave it to them. As the assassins dispersed, Sion descended from the throne and walked past Visas. He paused, close enough that his cracked breath brushed her veil. "You will learn," he whispered. Visas did not answer, but her head tilted slightly, as if she were listening to the sound of his pain. Sion walked on. Deep in the academy, past sealed doors and collapsed corridors, the Trayus core pulsed. It was a wound in stone, a place where the dark side gathered like stagnant water. Sion felt it calling to him. He welcomed it. He entered the core and stood alone in its presence. The galaxy beyond was weak, and Sion, undying, unyielding, was now its knife. Far from Malachor's poison gravity, in a room that smelled of dust and restraint, the Jedi gathered like survivors around a dwindling fire. Vrook sat rigid, spine straight, hands folded as if he could keep the galaxy from collapsing through posture alone. The lamp's weak light caught the sharp planes of his face, the lines carved by years of disappointment. His eyes were hard, not because he had not suffered, but because he had suffered and decided the world did not deserve tenderness. Zez sat opposite him, shoulders slightly hunched, as if expecting a blow. His gaze drifted toward shadows in the corners of the room, listening for threats that might not be audible. He looked like a man who had watched too many friends vanish without explanation. Katarr sat between them, his presence quieter but heavier. Under his robe, armor still clung to his body, a habit from years of war and duty. His hands rested near his saber, but he did not touch it. There was a weariness in him that no steel could mend. Between them lay a simple table. No holoprojectors. No grand maps. Only a small lamp and a scattering of old data pads, their screens dim. "The reports from Katarr," Zez said softly, voice brittle. "Are inconsistent." Rook's lips tightened. Inconsistent is a polite word. "They say the planet remains," Zez continued, swallowing. "The Miraluka live, but the Jedi who gathered there, dead," Vrook snapped as if the word itself were an insult. "Slaughtered. Not consumed. Slaughtered." Katarr exhaled slowly. "Then the threat has changed." Vrook's eyes flicked to him. "The threat has revealed itself." Zez looked down at his hands. "The Devourer. The one we feared." Katarr's gaze sharpened. "Gone," he said, as if stating a fact he had tasted through the Force. "I can feel the absence. The wound remains, but the mouth is closed." Vrook's jaw worked. Closed by whom? Silence stretched. Zez lifted his head. "The one they call the Lord of Pain," he whispered. Vrook's expression twisted with disdain. "An undying fanatic, a relic." Katarr's voice was calm, but the lamplight made his eyes look like dark glass. "Relics can kill," he said, "and fanatics can lead." Vrook leaned forward, hands tightening. "We cannot fight an army," he said. "Not like this. Not when the Republic itself bleeds." "Nah. The Republic bleeds because we withdrew," Zez said, and the words surprised even him. He flinched as if expecting reprimand. Vrook stared. "We withdrew because we were hunted." Katarr looked between them. "We withdrew," he said, "because fear made us small." Vrook bristled. "Fear kept us alive. And what have we done with that life?" Katarr asked quietly. The question hung like smoke. Zez's voice lowered. "There are rumors," he said. "A Jedi returning." Vrook's eyes narrowed. "No." Katarr's gaze sharpened. "From Exile." Vrook's hands clenched into fists. "We cast that one out." Zez swallowed. "The galaxy is different now. We are different now. Perhaps we need what we cast away." Vrook's expression hardened into something like hatred. "We do not need a wound." Katarr looked at the lamp flame, steady and small. "A wound," he murmured, "can be a weakness, or an opening." He lifted his gaze. "If the Lord of Pain hunts with discipline," he said, "then we cannot hide forever. And if the Exile returns, drawn by the same currents, then the Force is moving pieces we no longer control." "Nay," Vrook scoffed. "The Force does not control us." Katarr's mouth tightened into something like a bitter smile. "Then why do we speak in whispers?" he asked. Zez leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. "I feel him," he whispered. "Not the Devourer, the other, the pain. It is deliberate." Vrook stood abruptly, chair scraping stone. "Then we must cut ourselves off further," he said. "We must vanish. We must become shadows." Katarr rose more slowly. "Shadows do not save anyone," he replied. Vrook's gaze was cold. "Saving the galaxy is not possible," he said. "Surviving it is." Katarr stepped closer, his voice low. "If we only survive," he said, "then the Sith win without needing to kill us." The argument was not resolved. It could not be. Not in a lamp-lit room while the Republic Senate on Coruscant bickered like feuding nobles and the Outer Rim burned. Outside, the galaxy turned. And somewhere in that turning, A ship carried a woman who had once walked away from the Force. The Force, it seemed, had not walked away from her. Telos looked like a world trying to remember how to breathe. From orbit, its surface was a patchwork of scars and healing, vast stretches of dead ground beside careful grids of restoration. Atmosphere processors hovered like silent giants. Domes covered sections of land like glass bandages. Ships moved in slow lanes above the planet, their lights blinking in disciplined patterns. In a war room overlooking the planet, Katarr stood with his hands on the edge of a table, staring down at a holomap. The hologram painted his face blue, emphasizing the fatigue in the lines around his eyes. War had a way of making even heroes look older than they were. Officers clustered around him, murmuring in low voices. Their uniforms were clean, but their eyes were not. They had seen too many reports, too many casualty lists, too many worlds slipping from the Republic's grasp. "The Senate will not authorize a full fleet deployment," an officer said, voice tight. "Not without proof of a coordinated threat." Katarr's mouth tightened. "We have proof," he said. "We have dead Jedi. We have ships missing. We have outposts burned." "They call it piracy," another officer replied. "Or internal unrest. Anything but what it is." "And what is it?" Katarr asked, though he knew. The officer hesitated. "Sith." The word hung in the air like smoke. Katarr looked out through the viewport at Telos below. Restoration projects. Hope built on contracts and fragile promises. "The last war nearly broke us," he said. "We're still crawling out of that crater. If another Sith faction is rising..." His voice trailed off, not because he lacked words, but because he could see the shape of the future too clearly. A messenger entered, breathless. "Admiral," he said, "the Harbinger has arrived in system." Katarr turned. "Eerily," he murmured. "The crew requests docking clearance," the messenger continued. "They have a passenger." Katarr's expression shifted. "The Exile," he said quietly, and the officers around him went still. Some looked confused. Some looked wary. One looked angry, as if the mere idea was an insult. Katarr felt something stir in him. Memory, conflict, the echo of a friend who had once carried the weight of impossible choices. "Grant clearance," he said. As the messenger left, Katarr returned his gaze to the holomap. He traced a path with his finger, from Telos outward into the outer rim, where red points marked attacks and disappearances. "This isn't random," he said. "It's a campaign." An officer frowned. "Against the Republic." Katarr shook his head slowly. "Against the Jedi," he said. "We're just in the way." The room fell silent again. Somewhere beyond the viewport, the Harbinger moved toward the station, its lights steady, its hull scarred. Inside it, a woman carried a history that the Jedi wanted buried. Katarr watched it approach and wondered if the Republic was about to be saved by a ghost, or haunted by one. Mitra sat on the bench and listened to the ship. The Harbinger was a Republic cruiser, built for war, its corridors designed for speed and efficiency. It had a particular sound, a constant low hum of systems at work, punctuated by the occasional hiss of doors and the distant clank of boots. It reminded her of marching. It reminded her of orders. It reminded her of being someone else. The Marines outside the holding area pretended to be relaxed. They weren't. Their hands hovered near their weapons. Their eyes kept flicking to her as if expecting her to do something unnatural. Mitra did nothing. She could feel their suspicion like heat on skin, but she did not push back. She had learned long ago that resistance only made people tighten their grip. She stared at her own hands. They looked like hands. They did not look like they had once carried a lightsaber. They did not look like they had once touched the Force. That was the point. She had cut herself off. Not as punishment, not as penance, but as necessity. The Force had become too loud, too full of screams. It had been easier to step away than to drown in it. Now, as the Harbinger moved toward Telos, she felt something else, faint, like a pressure change in a sealed room. Not the Force returning. Something darker. A ripple of pain that made her skin prickle. A Marine shifted. "You feel it?" he asked, another, voice low. The other Marine snorted. "Feel what? My patience wearing thin?" Mitra's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Almost. She looked up. "There's something wrong," she said, voice calm. The Marines stared at her. One scoffed. "You're not a Jedi anymore." "I'm not," Mitra agreed. "But I know wrong when I hear it." The ship shuddered. Lights flickered. A distant alarm began to wail, muffled by bulkheads but urgent. The Marines stiffened. One tapped his comlink. "Bridge. Report. Dark. Static." Then a voice, strained. "We've been hit. Unknown vessel. Shields failing." Mitra felt her stomach tighten. Not with fear. With recognition. This was not an attack like pirates made. This was deliberate. Predatory. The ship shuddered again, harder this time. Somewhere distant, metal screamed. The Marines moved, arguing about protocol. One stayed at the door, weapon raised. The other ran down the corridor, boots echoing. Mitra remained seated. The pressure grew. It was not the Force returning to her. It was something pressing against the edges of her emptiness, like claws testing a locked door. She heard screams in the ship's distant corridors, then abrupt silence. The Marines outside went pale. One of them looked at her, eyes wide. "What is that?" Mitra did not answer. The air grew colder. Then the door to the holding area slid open. A figure stood in the corridor beyond. Nah, a Marine. Not a technician. A man-shaped ruin. Mitra's breath caught, not because she recognized his face, but because she recognized the feeling he brought with him. Pain, old and familiar. Like a battlefield remembered in bone. The Marine fired. Blaster bolts struck the figure and sparked off armor and flesh alike. The figure did not fall. He moved forward, and the Marine's screams cut off as if someone had closed a fist around his throat. Mitra stood. The figure's cracked gaze turned toward her. A voice like grinding stone spoke, low and intimate. "Exile." Mitra felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. She had walked away from the Force, but she had not walked away from Malachor. Adan ran because running was what kept him alive. He had learned it on Nar Shaddaa, in back alleys that smelled of oil and cheap spice, where kindness was a trap and hesitation a death sentence. He had learned it in cockpits too, dodging patrols and debts alike. When the Harbinger's alarms began to wail and the lights flickered red, he did not wait for explanations. He kicked open the cell door while the lock systems were still confused from the ship's jolts, and he nearly tripped over a small astromech droid that rolled out at the same time, chirping in frantic bursts. "Hey, watch it," Aten hissed, catching himself against the corridor wall. The droid chirped again, offended, then flashed a small hololamp. On its dome was a familiar designation. One Aten had seen painted on a battered ship in a dockyard once, back when his life still pretended to have direction. 3, Aten muttered, squinting. Of course it's you." The droid beeped in a way that sounded like urgency. Aten listened. The corridor around them vibrated with distant impacts. Somewhere farther down there was shouting, then a wet silence that made the hair on his neck rise. "Okay," Aten whispered. "Okay, not pirates." T3 rolled forward, projecting a flickering map of the ship. It highlighted a path with blinking arrows, then displayed a symbol that Aten recognized even without understanding droid code. "Danger." Aten snorted. "You're not exactly subtle." T3 beeped sharply, then spun and rolled toward a junction. Aten followed, ducking as another tremor shook the ship. Overhead, a light panel shattered and rained glass-like fragments onto the floor. The corridor smelled of smoke. They reached a corner and froze. Ahead, a group of Marines lay sprawled on the floor. Their armor was scorched. Their eyes were open, and glassy. The air around them felt wrong, heavy, cold. Atton swallowed hard. That's not normal. T3 emitted a low, mournful tone. Atton looked away quickly. He had seen death. He had caused it. But this felt different. This felt like something had reached in and simply turned the men off. He moved cautiously around the bodies. His boots left wet prints in blood. As he passed, he heard a sound. Faint, like stone grinding. He stopped. The corridor ahead was empty. The sound came from behind a sealed door. Atton leaned closer, listening. A voice spoke on the other side, low and terrible. Exile. Ducti. Atton's stomach dropped. He did not know the meaning of the word in that moment, but he knew the tone. He knew the way it wrapped itself around the syllables like fingers around a throat. He backed away. T3 beeped frantically, projecting the map again and flashing a new arrow. Yeah, Atton whispered, throat dry. I'm with you. They ran. Atton's mind scrambled trying to make sense of the situation. He had been a prisoner on this ship, transferred for reasons he hadn't bothered to ask. Now something was killing the crew, something that didn't move like a man. Something that called someone Exile, like it was a title carved in bone. He didn't like it. He didn't like anything he couldn't run from. And yet, as he sprinted down the corridor with a frantic droid beside him, he had the sudden, unwelcome realization that whatever had boarded the Harbinger was faster than fear. Mitra found the woman in the corridor just outside the bridge. She lay on the floor as if she had simply sat down and forgotten to stand again. Her robe was torn, stained with oil and blood. Her hair, once tied neatly, had fallen loose around her face. Her eyes were open, sharp, watching the world with a calm that felt unnatural amid screaming alarms. Mitra knelt beside her, the woman's gaze fixed on her. Not on her face, on something deeper. You, the woman whispered, voice barely audible over the alarms. Mitra felt something stir, an old instinct to reach out, to sense, to touch the force. The emptiness inside her remained, but it trembled at the edges, like a scar being pressed. I'm not who you think, Mitra said, though she wasn't sure what she meant by it anymore. The woman smiled faintly. You are exactly what you are, she murmured. A wound that walks. Mitra's jaw tightened. Who are you? The woman's lips formed a name, but the alarms swallowed most of it. Mitra caught only fragments. The woman seemed amused by that. Names, she whispered. Always. Such importance. A tremor ran through the ship. Somewhere deep, metal shrieked. The woman's hand shot out and gripped Mitra's wrist with surprising strength. Her fingers were cold. Listen, she hissed. He hunts you. Mitra's gaze flicked down the corridor. Red emergency lights pulsed, painting everything in heartbeat rhythm. Shadows moved at the edges of vision. I know, Mitra said. The woman's eyes narrowed. No, she whispered. Not like this. Mitra leaned closer. Tell me. The woman's grip tightened. Do not fight him with anger, she whispered. He is made of it. Mitra felt something like bitter laughter rise in her throat. Then what do I fight him with? The woman's smile was thin, almost cruel. With choice, she whispered. With surrender, when it is not defeat. Mitra stared. The woman's hand loosened. Her gaze shifted past Mitra, toward the corridor behind. Mitra turned. Sion stood there, lit by the pulsing red. His body looked worse up close than it had from across the holding area. Cracks ran across his face like dried riverbeds. Dark energy pulsed beneath his skin, visible in thin, glowing seams. His eyes were pits of old fury. He looked at Mitra as if she were a memory he wanted to break. You left, he rasped. Mitra rose slowly, placing herself between him and the woman on the floor. I survived, Mitra said. Sion's mouth twisted. You ran. Mitra's voice stayed steady. And you died, she replied. A low sound came from Sion's throat, almost laughter, almost a growl. He stepped forward. Mitra felt the air change. Not the force, not directly. But something in the room responded to him. Pain had a gravity of its own. The woman on the floor lifted her head slightly, her gaze sharpening. "Not here," she whispered urgently. "Not now." Mitra did not look back. She kept her eyes on Sion. "You want me," Mitra said. Sion's saber ignited, red light flooding the corridor. "I want what you are," Sion whispered, "and I will tear it out of you." Mitra's hand went to her belt. She did not have a lightsaber. Not yet. Not anymore. But she had a Vibrock knife. She pulled it free. The blade hummed to life, vibrating with lethal intent. Sion laughed. Mitra tightened her grip and stepped forward anyway. The first strike nearly killed her. Sion moved faster than a creature his body should have allowed. His saber came down in a brutal arc, meant to split her from shoulder to hip. Mitra twisted barely, and her Vibrock knife met the saber in a shower of sparks that stung her face. The force of the blow drove her backward. Her boots scraped on blood-slick metal. Her wrist ached. Sion advanced without pause, his saber hammering again and again, each strike a condemnation. Mitra did not try to match strength. She could not. She moved the way she had moved in war, lean, efficient, using angles, using timing, using the environment. She ducked under a swing that scorched her hair. She rolled, came up behind him, slashing toward the back of his knee. Her Vibrock knife bit into flesh. Sion did not fall. He turned, and the crack in his leg sealed as she watched. The wound closed like a mouth. Mitra's stomach tightened. "You cannot win," Sion said, and the words were almost gentle, almost sympathetic. "Not with that." Mitra gritted her teeth. "I'm not trying to win," she said. "I'm trying to live." Sion's eyes narrowed. For an instant, something flickered there. Recognition. A twisted kinship. Then, it hardened into rage. He swung again, and this time Mitra could not block fully. The saber scraped across her forearm, burning through fabric and skin. Pain flared, sharp and clean. She hissed and stumbled. Sion pressed, raising his saber for the finishing blow. A blaster bolt struck Sion's shoulder from behind, exploding into sparks. It did not stop him, but it made him turn. Atton stood at the far end of the corridor, panting, blaster raised with shaking hands. T3 rolled beside him, projecting frantic lights. "Hey!" Atton shouted, voice cracking. "Ugly, over here!" Sion's head tilted. He looked at Atton the way a predator looked at a barking dog. Then he looked back at Mitra. "You bring friends now," he rasped. Mitra did not answer. She used the moment to move. She darted toward the woman on the floor, scooping her up with an arm under her shoulders. The woman was lighter than she should have been. Her strength felt like it belonged to her mind, not her body. "Can you walk?" Mitra asked. The woman's lips curved faintly. "I can," she murmured, "but not for long." Mitra tightened her hold and pulled her away. Sion moved to follow. Atton fired again. Bolts struck Sion's chest. His flesh charred, cracked. He kept walking. Atton's face went pale. "That's not," he stammered. Mitra shouted, "Run!" Atton did not need to be told twice. He turned and sprinted, T3 rolling fast beside him. Mitra half-carried the woman down the corridor, her own wounded arm burning. The ship shook again, harder, violent. A warning siren changed pitch, rising. "Impact!" A voice blared over comms. "Hull breach imminent." Mitra glanced down the corridor behind them. Sion followed, unhurried, as if time belonged to him. He raised a hand. The air tightened. Mitra felt invisible pressure seize at her legs, at her chest, trying to slow her, trying to drag her to a stop. Pain flared in her forearm wound. The emptiness inside her shivered. She pushed. Not with the Force. She did not have it. She pushed with stubbornness. Her feet kept moving. Atton reached a junction and slammed a hatch control. The door began to close. Mitra lunged through with the woman. T3 slipped under at the last second. Atton threw himself after them. The hatch sealed with a hiss. For a heartbeat, they were trapped in dim light, panting. Then the metal door bulged inward, as if punched from the other side. Mitra's breath caught. Atton backed away, blaster trembling. The bulge receded. Then came another blow. The door groaned. The woman in Mitra's arms whispered, "He will not be stopped by doors." Mitra's jaw tightened. "Then we stop him another way," she said. She looked around. The corridor here led toward escape pods, toward the ship's hangar, toward the only way out. "Move," Mitra said. They ran. Behind them, the hatch screamed as metal warped. And Sion, patient, relentless, kept coming. The hangar bay was a storm made of metal and fire. Smoke rolled across the deck in thick sheets. Emergency sprinklers hissed, sending down cold mist that turned the air into a choking fog. A shuttle sat on the deck with its ramp lowered, its engines whining in protest as if it already knew it would be asked to do something impossible. Marines were scattered in pockets, firing at shapes in the smoke, assassins perhaps, or husks, or simply shadows. Blaster bolts flashed blue-white, illuminating faces twisted with fear. Mitra's boots pounded on the deck. The woman at her side leaned heavily, her breath shallow. Atton ran ahead, shouting at the shuttle pilot. "Get that thing ready," he yelled. "Now." The pilot, pale and sweating, fumbled with controls. T3 rolled beside Mitra, chirping frantically and projecting a map that made little sense in the chaos. Mitra's wounded arm throbbed. Her grip on the vibrat knife was slick with blood. She could smell burning fuel, hear the distant scream of rupturing metal. And beneath it all, she felt him. Not with the Force, not directly, with memory. Malachor's gravity, the sound of bones breaking, the taste of ash. Shine stepped from the smoke. He looked like a legend told by drunk soldiers, an undying Sith in a burning hall. Red light from his saber painted the fog like blood. His cracks glowed brighter in the hangar's firelight. Atton froze. His blaster lowered slightly. "Yeah," Atton whispered, voice barely audible. That's him." Mitra pulled the woman closer to the shuttle ramp. "Go," she said. Atton blinked. "Go where?" "Off this ship," Mitra snapped. Atton swallowed and motioned for T3. The droid beeped and rolled up the ramp. Atton followed, half turning as if expecting Sion to appear behind him. Mitra stayed on the deck. The woman beside her gripped her sleeve. "Do not," she whispered. "Not alone." Mitra's eyes stayed on Sion. "I don't have a choice," she said. The woman's lips curved faintly, bitter. "You always had a choice," she murmured. "That is your curse." Sion advanced. Each step left faint cracks in the frost on the deck, as if the metal itself flinched away. Mitra raised her vibrif. Sparks danced along its edge. Sion stopped a few paces away. "You run again," he said. Mitra's voice was steady. "I'm leaving," she replied. "There's a difference." Sion's head tilted. "You think distance will save you," he rasped. Mitra's mouth tightened. "No," she said. "I think movement is survival." Sion stepped forward, saber lifting. Mitra lunged first. She aimed not for his blade but for his side, trying to get close, trying to use his size against him. Her vibrat knife scraped along his armor, showering sparks. She ducked under a swing that would have taken her head and slammed her shoulder into his ribs, driving him back half a step. His body felt wrong. Too heavy. Too cold. Like pushing against a stone wall. Sion backhanded her. The blow sent Mitra skidding across the deck. Her shoulders slammed into a crate. Pain flared bright. She tasted blood. Sion approached. Mitra forced herself to stand. The shuttle engines whined louder. Atton shouted from inside, "We're leaving, with or without you." Mitra's gaze flicked to the shuttle ramp. The woman was already climbing, slow but determined. Mitra turned back to Sion. "Not today," she whispered. She reached down and grabbed a loose fuel line that had been severed in the chaos. It spewed flammable mist into the air, shimmering. Sion stepped closer, saber raised. Mitra flung the fuel line toward him. The red saber cut it instinctively. Fire erupted. The hangar bay became a furnace. Flame rolled outward, swallowing the space between them in a wall of orange and white. Sion's silhouette stood within the blaze, unmoving. Mitra ran darkly. She sprinted up the shuttle ramp, lungs burning, pain screaming through her wounded arm and bruised shoulder. Atton grabbed her and yanked her inside. "Are you insane?" he shouted. Mitra did not answer. She slammed the hatch control. The shuttle lifted off, engines screaming. Through the small viewport, Mitra saw Sion in the fire. His form was scorched, blackened, but still upright. His saber's red glow cut through the flames like an accusation. And she knew, deep in her bones, that the fire had not stopped him. It had only delayed him. The shuttle screamed as if it could feel fear. Its engines strained, pushing it away from the Harbinger as the Republic cruiser began to die behind them. Through the viewport, Mitra watched the ship's hull buckle, sections tearing free like torn cloth. Silent explosions blossomed in space, brief flowers of light that vanished into darkness. Atton slammed his hands on the controls, cursing under his breath. "This thing wasn't built for evasive maneuvers," he snapped. Mitra braced herself against the wall, jaw clenched, as the shuttle shuddered. Her forearm burned where Sion's saber had grazed her. The skin there was blistered, raw. She tried not to think about it. Pain was a distraction if you let it be. A weapon if you didn't. The woman sat strapped into a seat behind them, eyes half-lidded. She looked calm, but her breathing was shallow, and sweat slicked her forehead. T3 beeped urgently, projecting a flickering trajectory. A gray sphere appeared on the projection. Paragus, a mining facility hidden in the void. Atton's eyes widened. "Paragus?" he barked. "That place is still operational?" The woman's voice was low. "It is," she murmured. "And it will not remain so, if he follows." Mitra stared ahead. Outside, debris spun. Panels, fragments of hull. A drifting body in a torn suit. The shuttle weaved through it, clipping a piece of wreckage that sent a shudder through the cabin. Atton hissed. "If we make it to Paragus, we can hide in the tunnels," he said. "We can find a ship. We can..." "Hide?" Mitra cut in, voice sharp. Atton glanced at her, eyes narrowed. "You got a better plan?" he snapped. Mitra's mouth tightened. She looked back toward the Harbinger's dying silhouette. Sion. She could not see him now, swallowed by fire and smoke and vacuum. But she could feel the certainty of him, the inevitability. "There's no hiding from that," Mitra said quietly. Atton scoffed. "Everything can be hidden from," he muttered. But the bravado in his voice was thin. The woman's hand lifted weakly, fingers curling as if grasping something invisible. "He's not only hunting you," she whispered. Mitra turned. "What does he want?" she demanded. "Why me?" The woman's gaze fixed on Mitra's face, too sharp for someone so exhausted. "Because you are what he cannot be," she whispered. Mitra frowned. "I don't understand." The woman's lips curved faintly. "You let go," she murmured. "And you lived." Mitra's throat tightened. She did not answer. She turned back to the viewport. Paragus grew larger, a gray, bleak presence against the stars. The mining facility around it was a cluster of skeletal structures and rotating arms, like a spiderweb made of metal. Atton guided the shuttle toward it, hands shaking slightly. As they descended, Mitra felt the pressure in her emptiness shift. The sensation was faint, but there, like a distant footstep. Not on the shuttle. Behind them. Aden didn't feel it. The woman did. Her eyes opened wider, and for the first time she looked afraid. "He is coming," she whispered. Mitra's jaw tightened. The shuttle docked with a harsh clang. The hatch opened, and cold, recycled air flooded in, smelling of oil and rock dust. Paragus awaited them. Silent corridors, mining tunnels, and the promise of temporary shelter. Mitra stepped out first. She did not believe in shelter anymore. Paragus smelled like old sweat trapped in metal. The facility's corridors were narrow, practical, built for function rather than beauty. Pipes ran along the walls like veins. Condensation dripped from joints. The air was cold, carrying the metallic taste of recycled oxygen and the faint, constant grit of rock dust. Mitra walked ahead, vibrock knife held low, her steps quiet. Aten followed a few paces behind, blaster raised, eyes darting. He looked like a man trying to convince himself he was brave. He had the posture of someone used to lying for survival. T3 rolled between them occasionally, projecting maps and chirping warnings in agitated tones. The woman, Krya, she had finally said her name was, as if the act of giving it away cost her something, moved more slowly. She leaned on the corridor wall now and then, catching her breath. Her face was pale, but her eyes remained sharp, evaluating everything. Aten glanced back at her. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, voice wary, not kind. Krya smiled faintly. "No," she replied, "but I am sufficient." Aten frowned. "That's not..." He shook his head. "Forget it." They reached a junction where the corridor opened into a small common area. Tables bolted to the floor, a ration dispenser, a dead holoscreen. The lights here flickered. Mitra froze. On the far side of the room lay a miner's body. Aten's breath caught. "Oh no." Mitra approached slowly. The miner's suit was torn. His skin was gray, eyes open, mouth stretched as if in mid-scream. There was no visible wound that explained death. It looked as if the life had been pulled out. Aten swallowed hard. "That's familiar," he murmured. Mitra's gaze flicked to him. "You've seen this before." Aten's jaw tightened. "I've seen a lot," he replied quickly. Krya stepped closer, her movements measured. She looked down at the body, then lifted her head slightly as if listening. "This is not him," Krya said. Aten blinked. "Not who?" Krya's gaze turned toward Mitra. "There are others hunting you," she murmured. "Machines, wearing the faces of droids. They cut through life with cold purpose." Mitra frowned. "Droids?" Krya nodded slightly. "They seek you," she said, "because they believe you are valuable." Aten's laugh came out harsh. "Great," he muttered. "Sith monsters and murder droids. What's next? A rancor in the cafeteria." T3 beeped sharply, projecting an urgent message, an arrow pointing deeper into the facility, toward the administration levels. The map flashed a warning symbol. Mitra's jaw tightened. "We need a ship," she said. "Something that can leave." Aten nodded quickly. "Yeah," he said. "That's the smartest thing anyone has said today." Krya's gaze stayed on Mitra. "Leaving is not escape," she murmured. Mitra's eyes narrowed. "Then what is?" Krya's smile was thin. "Learning," she said. "Understanding the shape of your enemies. Understanding yourself." Mitra's hand tightened around the vibrock knife. "I don't have time for lessons," Mitra said. Krya's voice was soft, but it carried weight. "Then you will learn through pain," she replied. As he did. Aten's eyes flicked between them. "Can we have this philosophical conversation somewhere less corpsey?" he asked. Mitra moved toward the corridor leading deeper. Krya followed, slower but persistent. Aten followed too, because he did not like being alone in a place where death looked like a handprint. As they walked, Mitra felt the emptiness inside her again, still there, still silent, but now touched by faint tremors. Not the Force returning. Something else. The echo of being hunted. The pressure of inevitability. She did not believe in destiny. She had broken it once. But the galaxy had a way of remembering. And Sion, somewhere behind them, remembered too. They reached the docking bay hours later, and the air there felt heavier, as if the facility itself had begun to anticipate grief. Industrial lights cast hard white pools on the deck. Steam drifted from vents, curling around stacks of crates and machinery. The bay was mostly empty. No bustling crews, no chatter, no hum of commerce. Only the low throb of distant generators and the occasional hiss of pressure seals. Mitra stood at the edge of an airlock stair, looking out at the skeletal frame of the mining rigs beyond. Space stared back, indifferent. Atton leaned against a crate, trying to look casual. He failed. His fingers kept tapping his blaster grip. His gaze kept flicking to shadows. T3 rolled in circles, projecting a signal trace. Faint, intermittent, like a heartbeat on a dying monitor. Kraya watched the droid's projection with narrowed eyes. "The ship you seek is here," she murmured. Atton perked up. "Great," he said, forcing cheer. "Let's take it, and never speak of this place again." Mitra's gaze stayed on the bay's far end, where the darkness pooled thickest. "We're not alone," Mitra said quietly. Atton's forced cheer vanished. "No kidding," he muttered. "This place is full of—" He stopped when he saw the look on her face. "What?" he asked, voice tight. Mitra did not answer immediately. She listened. Not with the Force. She didn't have that. But there were other ways to listen. War taught you the rhythm of danger. Trauma taught you the smell of old enemies. She heard it now, a faint grinding sound, like stone dragged across stone. Too slow to be a machine. Too deliberate to be random. She stopped. Kraya's head tilted. Her expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened. "He is near," Kraya said, almost conversationally. Atton's face drained of color. He whispered. "You mean—" A shape moved in the far haze of steam. It was not fully visible, only a silhouette. A tall figure with a posture that radiated certainty. Red light flickered briefly, then vanished again, like a heartbeat seen through fog. Atton took a step back. "No," he breathed. "No, no, no." Mitra's grip tightened on her vibrock knife. Her forearm wound burned anew, as if remembering the saber's touch. Kraya leaned closer to Mitra, voice low. "You cannot run forever," she whispered. Mitra's jaw tightened. "Then I won't," she replied. Atton stared at her like she had lost her mind. "You're not seriously." Mitra cut him off with a glance. "Find the ship," she said. "Get it ready." Atton hesitated. Fear warred with survival instinct. T3 beeped sharply, projecting the route again, insisting. Atton swallowed hard. "Fine," he snapped, voice shaking. "Fine, but if we die, I'm haunting both of you." He ran, T3 rolling after him. Mitra stayed. Kraya stayed too, her posture calm despite the danger, as if she had been waiting for this moment. The grinding sound grew louder. The silhouette stepped closer, and the steam around it seemed to recoil. Mitra's heart pounded, not from fear but from the weight of inevitability pressing in. She looked at Kraya. "Why is he like that?" she asked, voice low. "Why won't he die?" Kraya's smile was faint, bitter. "Because he refuses to," she murmured. "Because pain is all he has, and he mistakes that for strength." Mitra's gaze returned to the approaching shadow. "And you," she said. "What do you mistake for strength?" Kraya's eyes glittered. "Understanding," she whispered. "Control." Mitra's mouth tightened. "And if you're wrong?" Kraya's smile did not falter. "Then the galaxy will pay," she said softly. The silhouette emerged from the steam enough for Mitra to see the glow beneath cracked skin, the ruin held together by hatred. Sion's voice reached her, low and intimate, like a knife laid against the throat. "You thought the void was the worst of us," he rasped. "But I remain." Mitra lifted her Vibrock knife, stance settling into something steady. "I'm still here too," Mitra said. For a heartbeat, the docking bay held its breath. Then Sion advanced, and the next siege began.